So we welcome everybody, and today we're very happy to invite or to have Shanaz Hussain, Dr. Shanaz Hussain, a very good friend of mine. We play often in the same spaces, find each other in in common places. I've learned to respect her and her thoughts on what she's going to be talking about. So we welcome you, Shanaz, and the format we're going to do today is I'm going to be interviewing her. I've got sight of her slides on my side, and so the questions I will ask is related to the slides. So uh, in the effort not to surprise her. Okay. Jacques, anything you want to say very quickly?
No, Alistair. I mean, just welcome everybody, and I'm really looking forward to our topic today because I think it's so relevant, and that we can all learn from it, not just to cope, but also to thrive in this environment that we are in.
Yeah, thank you. So, Shanaz, very quickly, I mean, we're going to make it quick because our time is
Yeah.
already way beyond. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. Why the topic of trauma is so of interest to you?
Yeah. So I'm a senior lecturer in the social work department at UCT, and I my interest is really working with communities and families who've experienced trauma. And although that is not necessarily an exciting topic to talk about, what makes me excited about it is the hope and the joy that can come after the traumatic experience, and what you can actually learn about yourself and your family and community. So that's my interest. I teach it and I do research with it.
Thank you. And that was very brief and very powerful. So the actual topic we want to talk about today is finding your joy and linking that with wishing you were here. Um, and so the first question, Shanaz, is what is joy?
Yeah. So lots of people get joy and happiness confused, but joy really is something that you experience in the depth of you. So, in other words, it's a body experience, it's a whole body experience. And in fact, they say it's a bodily state, and it's where you feel incredibly alive and you have that desire to live life to the full. Whereas, and it doesn't, and this is the key point, it doesn't necessarily depend on circumstances. Whereas we view happiness is sort of more or less based on your immediate feelings and your circumstances. Yay, you won 1,000 rand, so you're happy. And sometimes that doesn't even last very long. So there's this difference between the two, and so that's what joy is. You can experience it even in the midst of trauma, even in the midst of the pandemic, even in the midst of a lot of things not going well for you. You can, as a person, still experience that joy.
Thank you. And there's one of the things you often talk about is the joy and the connection as a result. You can name it the whole thing about human connection and joy.
Yeah. So one of the aspects then that makes me interested in the topic of trauma and joy is the idea that we actually can overcome our experiences of trauma when we connect with others. And when we connect with others, then we can actually experience that real joy that I'm actually talking about. And this is very much because it has to do with the way our brain has been set up, and the reason why we, for example, have such a huge rates of depression in our society at the moment, but also high substance misuse. is because our some people's or generally when we go through a difficult time, our brain, the hormones that naturally produce that happiness and joy is not very active. And so, and it's often prevented because of the trauma we're experiencing, or we're not really understanding what we are going through. And so we are then unable to release the natural hormones that bring us that joy. And that is why people abuse substances, because substances actually, in an unnatural way, helps to bring on those happy feelings. And yeah, so in other words, you can kind of see that one of my favorite authors, she says our body is has a natural pharmaceutical center. So yeah.
Is that where we later going to talk about dopamine,
Yeah.
oxytocin, serotonin,
Yeah.
endorphins? Jacques spoke
Yeah.
so well the other day around some of these things from another perspective. So it would be interesting to hear. But
Yeah.
before we get there, let's talk about the elephant in the room that is now most probably way bigger than it used to be in past times. And that elephant is called trauma. What
Yeah.
is trauma?
Yeah. So, what trauma actually is, it's when we lose our safe space. I think that generally our population and our communities, I think particularly communities of color, we are unable, we have a challenge in speaking about traumatic experiences, and we don't understand what trauma is. So, trauma is not just an accident or violence or abuse. Trauma is, we experience trauma as human beings when we lose our place of safety, when suddenly the world becomes an unsafe place for us. And so that can be a loss of a dream, that can be unemployment, that can be, my business being threatened, closure. It can relate, to organizations getting that notice that they're not going to be funded by government anymore. And that's traumatic. And I think that we are unable then to make that connection often between what we think as personal trauma, but connect that to our business, what we do as professionals, for example, and that word, trauma. And as I said, I think that people of color, we struggle with that, because what happens is that trauma can the effects of trauma means that we may experience some mental health struggles regarding stress, burnout, depression, anxiety. And I think that the shame that comes with saying you are feeling depressed, you're not coping, means that we don't talk about it. And I think that that is sometimes the issue.
Thank you. And so without me trying to make myself the center of attraction, I'm just going to ask,
Yeah.
is
No,
there a
that's right.
possibility that I might be experiencing trauma? So 2019, August 30th, my dad and my niece was murdered in the same event. It's taken all these years. We've been as a family in the High Court since the beginning of February. We spent the whole day today in court where the judge announced her verdict. So it was virtually from 10 o'clock she read up till about 3 o'clock. And so the verdict is what we wanted. So there was this joy, there was this celebration and clapping of hands in the. But is there any chance that I might be experiencing trauma?
Absolutely, and I think that we cannot. In fact, when you think of COVID-19, and not only COVID-19, all of us have experienced a trauma, and I think that often we think that we are over it. And I think that what I find happening in my practice and engaging with people around me is that we have this idea that because an event happened in the past and we've spoken a little about it, we are actually then we are actually we've dealt with it. So I think that there are many of us that haven't dealt with our past traumas, and I think that it manifests itself maybe in a lack of energy, maybe in a lack of being productive, coming up with new ideas, an unwillingness, or sometimes holding ourselves back. And it can even manifest itself in low self esteem that we constantly struggle with, or just we don't have that enthusiasm and that joy for life again.
Thank you, Shanaz. Let's quickly talk about that the chemist
The
or the
chemist and our
pharmacy,
brain, yes,
the
yes.
pharmacy in our brain.
The pharmacy in our brain. So but I thought particularly for the hormone dopamine. So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins are neurotransmitters, and so they send messages to the brain, and particularly the hormone dopamine is responsible for our feelings of getting a reward from something. It's also responsible for being productive. We seek out that focus. We seek out that reward that we want, that success that we want. Think of it when a guy develops a crush on a girl, so he's constantly seeking her out, and that's that hormone that comes in with that is released in our brains, even for our business and the success that we have. So what then happens is when we experience trauma, or we haven't worked through our traumatic experiences, what can happen is that the brain may not release enough dopamine. And we can then, and the issue with the dopamine is if we don't, the brain doesn't release enough dopamine, then what can happen is that we feel lethargic, we feel unmotivated, and then we feel like, I'm constantly tired. And so this is what happened, where we have that lackluster feeling, and we're really not motivated. So dopamine is primarily responsible for that. And then we have sort of oxytocin. Oxytocin is can also be affected. That's that need to connect, because now all of a sudden the world is an unsafe place. And because the world is an unsafe place where we need to protect ourselves, we struggle to connect with others, because trauma can also prevent us, or trauma can cause us not to trust. Then you have serotonin. Serotonin again is important is a mood stabilizer and can calm us and can help with focus as well. So all of these neurotransmitters or brain hormones and chemicals are affected when we experience trauma, because the brain is not able to release this because we are in survival mode. Another example, for example, is the hormone oxytocin. So oxytocin is actually a pain release or reliever, and you'll find that people who abuse substances, cocaine is a lot of plays on that hormone. So what happens is, if we're not getting enough pain release, then you actually find that we struggle then to process our hurt, our pain, and our anger even. And this all has an effect because the brain again is not releasing enough of that due to the trauma that we're experiencing, because when we go into trauma, we in a sense in survival mode.
Oh,
So yeah.
so also what I hear, there's one last question, and to the rest of us, if you would like to ask a question, um, the normal thing is just to wave at the bottom, and either myself or Jacques will let you in. But what I also do understand with this pharmacy in our brains is that we are well equipped We are
Yeah,
we are born with the right things to thrive and to see and to experience joy. It's what we do with our circumstances that either releases these things or hold it back, or releases it in the wrong way. Am I putting that
yeah, yeah,
fairly right? Okay.
yeah. No, no, that's correct. Yeah.
One
Did,
question
oh,
last. Sorry. You were going to say, Shanaz?
no, I was going to say, are you asking me about that?
Yeah, I was just, it was rhetorical. It's me thinking I know these things, so, but it was more a question. What happens if we just not dealing with trauma, and we leave it unprocessed,
Yeah.
as you would
So
call it?
yeah, so what then happens is that our brain will continue to not release the sufficient endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin. So the long-term effects is that on even on loss, and remember death. I mean, we've experienced a lot of losses in a range of different ways. Over the past 2 years, we can start to experience clinical depression. So typical depression in a sense is a healthy response to one of the stages of grief, but it can become complicated when it starts to affect our whole life, and we start to lose that energy, and we start to lose that enthusiasm, and all we want to talk about is our depression.
Mm,
So that can be all our problems. So that's when our whole life can be disrupted by it, and that's when it becomes unhealthy. And then what actually happens, we go to the doctor, and he gives us tablets which activates the very hormones that I've been talking about and that we have. And so often in my sister's practice, my sister's a GP, what she finds is that so many people are coming in for physical symptoms that are actually related to the stress and the trauma they've experienced.
Thank you, Shanaz, and you've done well. I think we have Edward who's got a question. But thank you, Shanaz, for what you shared with us. And I'm sure this is such a massive topic that needs way more time. And most probably we're going to have to look one day and just doing an hour, 1.5 hour, that we will promote and invite people to come in. So, but let's talk about that. Edward, if you unmute, you are able to speak or to ask a question.
Hi, good evening, everybody. It was not actually a question, just a comment. Thank you, Shanash, for your presentation. Yes, the light went off when you speak about endorphins. I think it was endorphins, the one that if you have a lack of it, you have if you have a lack of it, then you have a lack of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I found that if I have a productive day, then I'm actually feeling more energetic in the evening. And
Mm,
then when I've got a lazy day, just the opposite in the evening. And
Hmm.
I could never understand it until you explained it about the chemistry in the brain now. So thank you for that.
It's a pleasure.
thank you, Edward. Very good statement and very practical example of how it actually manifests in your space. Any other questions?
Thank you so much for sharing your insight with all of us, Shanaz. Highly valued and very important topic. I was wondering, like, when a person go through trauma, right, or you see trauma coming, whatever it is, what's that Formula One, like one formula that you would say for us to do in order to maintain our joy as well as progress out of it as fast as we possibly can as well.
Uh, I think firstly there is no as fast as possibly can. I think that that's the whole issue, is that sometimes as human beings we want to get over it too quickly, and that's when the problem, the issue, kind of comes in. So what I suggest is that when you do experience a traumatic event or a very stressful circumstance, or whether it's your past or current, that you talk about it, that you reflect on it. How am I feeling about this? And I think often as adults we go to the intellect, what should I do? And we become practical. But when I
Yeah.
work with patients, I go back to them. I said, no, I'd like to know how that made you feel. What did that make you feel? And then they'll sit a few moments and then we'll start talking about the emotion. And so that is what I would encourage you to do. And you could write about it. So, all of this doesn't, we don't require therapists. We require some time to reflect about on what we are feeling and what we are experiencing, and to try and make sense, around those issues. And some issues are more complex than others, and we may need to speak to someone about it, who has the knowledge and the expertise. But there are other things that we can actually reflect upon, through writing, through chatting to our normal support system. And I often ask people, where did the stress or trauma go to? Because
Mm,
we can say, oh, we've dealt it, but we don't really think about where did it go to. It doesn't just
Mhm.
disappear.
That's a
and
very,
And
very
and
so, yeah,
interesting.
so I was going to add, so writing about it, talking about it, being curious actually, is the
Mm.
start. Don't judge it. Be curious about what you're feeling.
thank you.
I
Oh,
gotta love
because
that
that,
though. That's very
yeah.
insightful because I mean I've realized one of my coping strategies was that I'm always looking for the practical thing to do and things like that. But actually accepting the emotion is so important actually, and I've realized that I've also been using music a lot to pull
Mm,
myself out of
Mm,
situations like that.
yeah,
Also
that's
asking
another
myself a
helpful
question.
tool.
Yeah,
because
yeah. And asking that
because
questions in
music,
terms of what do we learn from this? How do we grow stronger? And what can we be thankful for in that situation? So very, very interesting. I should just also accept it as is and then, just do what I gotta do. So thank you. Highly appreciate it.
A
thank you,
pleasure.
Paulo. Thank you very much, Shanaz. And the one thing that we always, in Cape Town, we say "kap aan." In other words,
Yeah,
carry on, or get
Cap
up
yeah,
and go and just carry on.
yeah.
Um,
gotta
we
love
we
it.
think we're good when we tell people that. I was doing an online video, and I spoke about, because I'm dealing with leaders who virtually can't get up in the morning because of this very thing. They 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 stop dreaming, they stop believing, they stop even thinking that the day can actually turn out well. Um, and then often I would force them to a coffee, um,
Mm,
especially late morning. But one of the first advice I said, if you feel like sleeping in, take another half an hour, because your body just needs that little extra rest. But get up afterwards and then talk about it. Don't just cup on or carry on, as we say. Shanaz, thank you very much. I'm going to ask um, Jacques to close for us today.
Oh yes, sure. I was so engrossed, and I mean, we basically spent 25 minutes on such an important topic, and Shanaz did very well in just kind of giving us highlights. But each and everything that you've said, Shanaz, you can just drill down and probably spend the next weeks talking about it.
yeah.
But I think the so thank you very much for your generosity and sharing your wisdom with us. And I mean, we literally said is basically finding your joy, and this is quite possible even in trauma. And so, I was listening to the very practical advice. There's such a stigma still attached to mental health issues, and that's why I think we don't really want to talk about it. And I like the fact that you said, well, it's kind of don't go into action mode just yet, and do the self reflection. But the word that I particularly like is to be curious, just to be curious. And in this case, curiosity, to everyone listening, does not kill you. It does not. It actually feeds you. So,
Definitely.
um, and so yes, hope that just understanding what seems to happen with the chemistry, the imbalances, different hormone levels, accepting that these things do actually happen and within all of us, and also the acknowledgement. Alistair asked a question: do you think I'm experiencing trauma in this case? And the answer was yes. And I think this is the other thing, is not avoiding the topic generally, and also not avoiding or afraid to confront what is happening within us, not to judge but to learn. And I think there's a
Mhm.
learning element also in terms of what you said. So thank you very much. I think, Shanaz, that was chapter one.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
I think
definitely.
so
You can
too.
invite me again. Thank you for the invitation. Yeah.
Oh, Shanaz, I think you've just given us an open invitation. We are definitely going to make use of it. You need to come back and maybe just drill down into some of these things that you've been speaking about. But yeah, thank you, Alistair, as usual, for facilitating the conversation. And so, what are we going to be talking about next? You know, next week, are we going to deal with basically talking about the essence of a leadership brand, as we said?
Yes, we
And that
can.
will still be you, Alistair?
Yes, we'll do that.
Okay. All right. So we want to titillate that conversation, but also by the same token, is agree with Shanaz when it's convenient for her to come back and share with us again.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So I'll connect with Shanaz and you, Jacques, and let's see.
yes,
It's a definite yes. We just need to. It's not if. It's yes. When.
yes, and
Right.
that's good. And so obviously we need to be structured in how we do this. But everyone, as is wont, remember we publish these videos on the YouTube channel. You can also you quite welcome to listen to replays on YouTube, on this platform as well. You come, you join the club, you listen to the playback. Obviously, on the channel we try and publish a video that at least we can boost audio and normalize things like that. But and the channel is the Mufasa Coaching Practice YouTube channel. So, but thank you for attending, all of you. Thank you, Alistair, facilitating tonight, being my friend and co-host. And once again, Shanaz, have a great evening and thank you for your generosity. And for all the questions that came, Edward and Carlo, thank you for asking those questions and interacting and making this the kind of a platform that we want. It's not just one-way conversation, but rather dialoguing, if you like. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week.